So welcome everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're calling in from. And thank you for joining today's webinar on Small is the New Big Business. I'm Steve Henninger, Partner Development Manager with Cisco, and with me I have Nova Kopitar from RingCentral. Today we're going to talk about maintaining a small business mindset. As businesses grow, many lose sight of the things that made them successful in the first place: innovation, efficiency, the ability to quickly adjust to changing market needs. Today we're going to discuss, regardless of an organization's size, lessons that can be learned from small businesses. As we all know, all businesses start out small. However, some will grow their employee base into the thousands. For example, Cisco today has over 70,000 employees. However, most will remain smaller but profitable organizations. Perfect example, I grew up in the Bay Area, and my father actually started his business in our garage in the 1970s. No, my dad was not Steve Jobs, Bill Hewlett, or David Packard. Thus, I'm here on the call today working. But my dad did start his business in a garage and grew the company to 35 employees and stayed in business for over 25 years, which is much more of a typical scenario of how businesses grow versus the examples you see highlighted here on this screen. As stated by the late Steve Jobs, Apple is the biggest startup on the planet. In essence, companies that remain successful typically stay true to their roots regardless of an employee size or how much they grow. However, for a multitude of reasons, it's not always easy to maintain a small business mindset of flexibility and nimbleness as the organization starts to grow and evolve. So the question is, how do you maintain your small business roots? Those grown out of, as we highlighted, innovation, flexibility, and efficiency as you begin to expand and grow your business. Or how do you get back to a small business mindset if your organization has grown already faster than your current internal infrastructure can support? During this webinar, Nova and myself will attempt to answer that question of how to get back or how to maintain that small business mindset. I will now hand it over to Nova.
Great, thanks Steve, and thanks for that great introduction. Hello everyone, thank you again for joining today's webinar. Before we jump into the presentation, I just wanted to quickly remind everyone that this is meant to be an interactive session, so be sure to ask your questions along the way through the Q&A box. And we will definitely have some time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. And any unanswered questions we will follow up with after via email or a phone call just to make sure that everyone's questions do get answered. So again, just want to encourage everyone to ask questions along the way and we'll definitely get you answers. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into the presentation. So to start, I really wanted to start with, kind of giving you guys an understanding of some of the challenges bigger companies have. So here's a great quote from the CEO of Bulldog Drummond, where it's really talking about how well-resourced corporations, even though they have larger teams and bigger operating budgets, they're typically less courageous, less resourceful, and take longer to get products to the market. And I really think that this is a terrific setup for the first topic that we want to talk about, which is efficiency. So, one of the things that is really true to the heart of a small business is being able to operate efficiently. But as your business grows, like Steve was talking about, there's a lot of challenges that come into play. You have more people that need to work together. You have more projects that you need to manage, more things that you need to keep track of, like equipment and inventory. So you went from kind of being this smaller business where maybe you're in the same office, maybe it's like when you need help, you could just shout across the desk and the person's right there, to now something that's bigger and more complex, where people are all throughout the organization, where now when something needs to get done, instead of just hollering across the office, you actually have to find the right person and work it through a process. So there's all of these different things that are happening that are impacting efficiency as your business grows. And, to kind of dive in deeper, I think one of the biggest things that, when companies are getting bigger, that becomes a challenge is that everything has a process. Even seemingly simple requests, like getting office supplies, requires some kind of process. And, you know, the more processes you have, the more costs that you need to incur, the more people that are touching something. So you have all of that headcount, not to mention all of the infrastructure and such that you would need underneath to manage that process. And often processes become confusing or time-consuming because now you have to have all of these checkpoints and such in place. You know, it could take weeks to get something very simple that the person may need today to get the job done. And oftentimes the systems that are being used to manage these processes are really designed for power users. They're designed for, you know, IT professionals, or maybe it's a procurement system where it's a purchasing professional or what have you, but it's really designed for someone that lives in the system. But if, you know, we're honest about it, a lot of the users of these systems really aren't people that live in their day-to-day. They're people that are just trying to get whatever they need solved to get the job done. So these are things that you really need to keep in mind as you're growing your business and you're putting more of this process into place. So let's talk about how you kind of stay true to those small business roots. We have some great stats here from a recent IDC study, but the bottom line is that most small businesses make efficiency a priority. You know, you're having to wear multiple hats. You're having to do a lot of things at the same time. So being efficient is extremely important. So in this study, 60% of SMBs cited it as their #1 business priority, and 23% of those are rating efficiency-enhancing infrastructure investments also as a high priority. And I think that's really going to, you know, the fact that these people are really putting that focus on efficiency. They want to make sure they have an infrastructure that can support that. And more importantly, it's about empowering your employees. It's how do you operate more smartly? Does an office supply request really require it to go through 3 levels of approval, you know, or, you know, simple requests to get things done? Is it easy for people to get to the people that they need to get the answers? And then also leveraging systems that can be used by everyone, not just the power user. So, you know, there's a lot of great things that we'll talk about a little later in this presentation around innovation, about moving things to the cloud, all of these different things that are, you know, providing a way for employees to really get in there and do what they need, not necessarily having to wait in an IT queue or some other queue to get their issues resolved. And, you know, the quote here that we have on the side from the CEO of TravelShark, I think really kind of sums up just, you know, what we're talking about today in this presentation, but it's really about, you know, big companies have to deal with bureaucracy all day long, and they really do admire, and they really do, I think, want to operate as quickly and as nimbly as small businesses can, because, you know, it doesn't take 3 months to get a consensus or to build something out. They're getting things done today, and that's really at the root of efficiency. And there's so many different things that go along with how you can empower efficiency. So I'm going to turn it back over to Steve here really quick to start diving in a little bit more around some of the ways different technologies are really helping to empower employees. Steve?
Great, thank you, Nova. If you can go to the next slide. So you can see here there's a quote from Yankee Group talking about the need for mobility and the impact. Not go so far as to say this is pretty understated. Probably the #1 trend that's taking place in business today that's having the most profound impact on most companies is mobility. The fact is 56% of information workers are spending time working outside of the office today, yet I would go so far as to say that 100% of IT departments or staffs are being impacted on some level with this trend towards mobility. And when we take a look at mobility, it's often defined by or equals flexibility. And the irony is that the need for mobility and a flexible work environment typically grows as a business expands. Yet individual job roles during this period of growth typically are becoming more defined during this period of expansion. Typically within smaller organizations, we have employees wearing multiple job hats, you know, covering different functional roles. There tends to be more of a need for in-person, on-site interaction that helps to facilitate quick decision-making and nimbleness that small businesses really base their foundation around. But again, as the business grows, more job roles become more defined, and employees are not always confined to a single location. Maybe the business now has multiple sites or locations. Maybe there's an increased need for more travel, and there's now associated budgets that can support that type of activity that wasn't there during the early years. Or maybe there's more flexible work-life schedules that become an option to employees as the company becomes more mature and more established. So how do you enable a more flexible and mobile work environment? Well, to answer that question, we can take a closer look at the 3 key trends in the market today that really is shifting the physical borders of businesses and driving the need for mobility. First, we kind of highlighted just a few moments ago, business location. Organizations used to have all employees and all related activity within a defined perimeter. But today, based on some of the reasons we described plus others, that is no longer the case. Again, we referenced 56% of information workers are working outside the office for some period of the day at this point, and that's going to continue to grow. So you now have this location border or challenge that needs to be overcome. That's one of the first key trends that's taking place. Secondly, we have the consumerization of IT, or what we like to call the rise of the individual. You now have employees bringing all types of disparate mobile devices into the workplace, such as smartphones and tablets. Based on many different operating platforms, you've got iOS, Android, Windows Mobile, different hardware platforms. You now have smartphones generating more sales than all PCs and notebooks combined. This has put a lot of stress on organizations and their IT departments, and as such, we now have this IT border or challenge that needs to be overcome. And then the third key trend that we see is applications. Applications typically in the past resided within a single company's IT room or data center where you had complete control over that application. But now, with cloud computing and cloud services, applications can reside anywhere. According to Gartner, within 2 years, so by 2014, 90% of organizations will allow work-related applications on personal devices. So you now have this application border that needs to be overcome. So kind of rounding out the third challenge that we're seeing in the industry today. You can go to the next slide, please, Nova. And so when you take a look at today's environment, and based on those 3 borders or challenges I just described, to gain the most productivity out of your employees, they need to be able to connect from any device, from any location, at any time, to have the freedom and flexibility of mobility. Another important consideration based on a Gartner survey, as you're expanding your business, keep in mind 40% of new workers would include bring your own device as a consideration for what companies they want to work at. And in fact, here within Cisco, I've seen some reports that we've done internally where when the company's looking at how do you draw new talent, new employees, the ability to have a flexible work environment is starting to outweigh top dollar or compensation. So another point to keep in mind. So with that, Nova, I will hand it back over to you.
Terrific. Thanks, Steve. And just to kind of build off on your last point here around really giving employees the freedom and flexibility to work the way that's most productive, from RingCentral's perspective, that's really about also allowing them to, not only have the freedom of being mobile, but giving them the flexibility to communicate their own way. So when you think about it, as employees are increasingly working more outside of the office, that doesn't mean that that fundamental need to stay connected to the office goes away. What it means is now, companies are really trying to provide employees with the tools and the applications to really, be able to stay connected, to have essentially the best of both worlds, to be able to stay connected to the office, make sure that they're not missing important calls or opportunities or the ability to reach out to people, as well as, again, giving them that freedom, to be able to either work from home if they're most productive, make it easy if there's someone that's on the road that needs to travel. So there's a lot of great things out there that, I just can't stress enough as, more and more companies and employees are having this be a requirement for them that can really empower and enable them to stay productive even if they are not within cubicle walls. So with that, I want to transition to our last topic here, and that's really around innovation. So another great quote here from Steve Jobs around when Apple came up with the Mac, you know, IBM was spending 100 times more on R&D. But it's not about the money. It's about the people and how you lead and how you know how much you get from there. So what I want to say, you know, around this point is really that it doesn't matter if it's a huge industry giant that's spending a ton of money. When you really look at innovation in the market, most of it is actually coming from smaller businesses because, again, you know, they're staying focused and staying true to what their mission is and what they're trying to do with that. So some of the challenges, though, that happens as a business grows around innovation, and, you know, I know through some of the other sections we've lightly touched on this, but it's really about, you know, now that your business is growing, you have more product lines and more customers to maintain, and that really does impact your R&D cycle and delays getting the new innovations, the thing that's going to, you know, make you a leader in your specific market because, you know, now you have a variety of products that you're going to have to innovate against. This is really, you know, something that's a big challenge when you look at on-premise solutions versus cloud-based solutions because, you know, with on-premise solutions, every customer has a very specific install at their location. So as companies are looking to, you know, roll out new innovation, they really need to be thinking about, you know, customer A's current customizations and how it'll work versus customer Z's specific integrations and customizations and how that would work. So that really does add a lot of complexity to the innovation and R&D cycle when they're really looking at those types of things in terms of innovating their own product. But another major challenge is also as your business grows, you know, often you try to be the master of all things, and that can derail the innovation process. So, you know, the more processes and infrastructures and servers and all of these things that you need to host and maintain, you know, you're spreading your resources really thin, or you're having to have a whole lot more resources that are much more costly, but at the end of the day, it's giving you less time and less focus on innovation because you're having to manage all of these things. So when we talk about, you know, kind of staying true to your small business roots here, it's that whole innovate or die concept. You really need to be focused on building your own innovations, building your own IP, and leverage innovative tools to help you do that. You know, a lot of companies, when they start their business, you know, in the case of RingCentral here, it's not like they start their business necessarily to become experts in business communications and telecom. You know, it's not core to the business value. So it's really, you know, what are you going to do to get all those core functions but still allow you to stay focused? And when you look at the stat here from IDC, and how SMBs are really spending, you know, a lot of money on advanced technology, this is, again, I think really goes back to that point where smaller businesses, you know, they need to leverage advanced technologies to kind of fill those gaps because they don't want to be experts in those areas. So when it comes to cloud communications, you know, here at RingCentral, what we're really trying to do is elevate customers so they can stay focused on that core business value by taking away the need for managing PBX boxes and wires and running wires and phone lines and all of those things. Move that to the cloud. Let the experts take care of that so you're not having to necessarily spend a lot of time and resources managing just this one system. The same thing can be said for, you know, technologies along Cisco's side with their IP and wireless phones. You know, in terms of the cloud communication space, as people are moving, you know, instead of having to have IT come do all the switch and moves wires, it's just as easy as unplugging your phone and plugging it in to the next desk outlet. It's really, again, allowing companies to empower employees to do things for themselves, simplify what your IT or other resources would need to manage, so at the end of the day, you stay focused, you can innovate, you can continue to disrupt the market, and really, you know, stay true to yourself and succeed.
Those are really some interesting points, Nova, and I just want to add on to that from a Cisco perspective because we've really altered our strategy around small business over the last couple of years. Most of you, I'm sure, are familiar with Cisco on some level. Most notably, Cisco has our roots as a leader in networking for over 25 years, really with a core focus on large enterprise, at least to start with during the early development of our organization. But about 10 years ago, Cisco started focusing not just on data networking, but also on voice. However, that was really centered around on-prem PBXs, Call Manager, many of you may be familiar with, and Nova's already kind of highlighted some of the benefits of cloud-based offers. What many of you may not be aware of, though, is the direction and where Cisco sees the market going, and this is pretty recent. About 2 years ago, Cisco made an investment in small business of $100 million. So we're not just about enterprise anymore. And the focus was really around small business solutions, specifically companies with less than 100 employees. And within this market segment, we've actually identified three core business needs. And you can see that highlighted here on this slide. Starting off with basic. And these are customers that, as the name implies, really don't value technology or think technology has a real impact on their business. I think probably the best example might be a retail store or kind of a small location. Maybe there's a need for internet access. So the employee or the company may go down to Best Buy, buy a consumer-grade router, install it, and never really think about it again unless it breaks. Conversely, on the other end of the spectrum, we have what's referred to as elite customers. And as its name implies, these are organizations that by definition are small business in terms of employee size, yet they really act more like an enterprise customer. And I think probably the best examples from a vertical industry standpoint would be either legal or the medical fields. I mean, if you take a look at a law firm, you could have 40, 50 employees. They probably have a dedicated IT staff. They really value technology. It's going to have a real strong impact on both top and bottom line revenue. Think about the billable hours with the lawyer and all the data and storage and things that they have a need for, or even the medical industry for that matter. But where the largest need is within this sub-100 segment is this group that we refer to as open to guidance. And as its name implies, these are companies that do value technology. They recognize that it can have a positive impact to their business, to top bottom line revenue, yet they may not have dedicated IT staff. They may not know what the best solutions are to deploy, so they're going to look to a trusted advisor, to a service provider to help identify what that solution is. And so what Cisco has done from within our portfolio is to really develop solutions plug and play from your desktop all the way out to the wide area network or to your internet access tied to cloud services. So really the benefit here is establishing a model based on OpEx versus that real intensive upfront capital expenditure that you're probably familiar with if you're to deploy an on-prem IPVX. So again, this is, when you take a look at this slide, this is really a core focus of Cisco going forward. Cisco is really getting behind cloud. I'm sure you've seen a lot of the stories in the press. And it's really the wave of the future for organizations that want to have the flexibility to expand their services as their business grows and not have to pay for or make an investment in advance of that growth. So with that, I just wanted to highlight that, and I'll hand it back to you.
Terrific. Thanks so much, Steve. And, I really think that this is a great, overview for people to really start looking at, kind of where they fit in and, kind of going back to our three tenets here, thinking about, depending on where they are kind of in that continuum that you just presented, where these three areas fit in. So just to summarize again, innovation, we really do encourage people to take advantage of those new technologies. It allows you to stay ahead of the competition because you get to stay focused on what is core to your business. Efficiency, leveraging lean operations, leveraging, simpler processes, all of those different types of things to really increase productivity and control costs across the board. And then finally, flexibility, building that foundation that can easily adapt to new requirements, one of them being, mobility in the mobile workforce and how that's becoming an increasing requirement for employees to be able to do that. So, so with that, what I want to do, this was a half-hour webinar, so I do want to go ahead and answer a few questions that we have here, and of course, we will go ahead and follow up with any of the questions that we don't get to during the Q&A right now after the event. So let's go ahead and kind of jump into some questions here, Steve, and let's get your point of view on that. One of the questions that we have here is, will IT lose control of core business systems if they move to the cloud? Steve, did you have any thoughts on that?
No, I think actually kind of the reverse. I mean, you're going to have a lot more flexibility as applications and things move into the cloud. And that's really kind of a key focus of Cisco going forward. It's all kind of cloud-based. That's not the trend that's taking place today, and within Cisco we do not foresee anyone kind of losing that capability. In fact, we see it expanding.
And a follow-up to that, Steve, would be the question around security. So we have some questions here where people are talking about how, there's a resistance to embracing the cloud because of the fact that they don't want things to be exposed to other people. When it's hosted in-house, at least they know who is accessing. So in terms of security in the cloud, do you have any thoughts around that?
That's always a question. And within Cisco, for example, we have a very broad portfolio around security, and it's really part of our, and you may have, the person answering the question may have heard this, was referred to as borderless networks within Cisco, which is really our commitment to our core portfolio to enable mobility in cloud-based services, and it's really to highlight strengths of our portfolio from core routing, switching, application acceleration, mobility, and security. That's always kind of a concern. I think probably the #1 area around that is data storage, and I think there will be obviously I think a transitional period. People will probably dip their toe in the water to a certain extent, build up their confidence level. You look at data storage, there's a lot of these websites or services where you can store data up in the cloud. Many companies will still have on-site storage devices and then also have cloud and kind of support a hybrid or dual model, at least here in the short term. And I think that's just kind of the general theme that you'll see as we kind of make this transition. And it's not going to happen overnight, obviously, but it is a trend that has begun, and don't see it reversing course by any stretch.
And just to add to that, Steve, I work at RingCentral, which obviously is a cloud solution, but prior to that I also worked at Coupa Software, which is a cloud solution. So I've been asked this question I don't know how many times around security. And one of the things that I will say is that when you're looking at these different applications, there's a lot of verification and audits that go against cloud services exactly for this reason, to make sure that not only that there's compliance in a lot of different areas, but security being one of them. So as you're talking to different people and you're considering cloud solutions, ask them for that certification. Ask them to provide you with that information. Most will have it, and if they don't, that's something that should definitely raise some eyebrows for you to dig in a little bit deeper. But think about it, some of the biggest companies in the world are based on cloud, so it's definitely something to consider, and I think in terms of security, restrictions will get stronger and stronger, especially as more and more people start to adopt that. So let's see, I know we're at the end of the half hour, but I just want to ask a couple more questions, and then again we'll follow up with anyone else that had questions that we didn't get to today. So another question is, at what size do you think it makes sense for a company to adopt the cloud versus managing it in-house? I mean, do you think that it is based on the size of your organization, or is this something universally that people can take advantage of, Steve?
It's something that could be utilized universally. If you take a look, and you can go on to Google and probably pull up some industry research reports, cloud-based services, it started off, when you look at like from a voice standpoint, with smaller organizations, but it's now starting to be adopted within larger organizations as well. I would say, just kind of off the cuff, you typically see cloud most adoption in the sub-100 space. Probably the sweet spot is 5 employees, 4 employees, up to 50 to 75. But I think over time you're going to see that expand even further. So that's where we are, I think, in the life cycle of the solution. But really what it comes down to, I think, from a company standpoint, and there's probably some specifics in terms of vertical markets that you're in. As I highlighted earlier, if you're a legal firm, you may have some folks on site within your own IT that are dedicated that can kind of help support an on-prem system, for example. But for most companies, they don't have the resource to apply to that, and that's where cloud makes the most sense, right? It frees you up to really focus on your core business. It frees up your capital. You don't have to invest in advance of growth. And also, you don't have to pay for services, and I'll say, Cisco, we're kind of in that classification where, a lot of our classic solutions, those that many people are familiar with based on iOS, such as Catalyst and ISR routers and so forth, are very feature-rich. And so, a lot of businesses want just certain features, and cloud gives you the ability to pay for what you need when you need it.
Yeah, I think
hopefully that helps.
No, I think that's great, Stephen. Just to kind of build off of that, I know that a lot of companies think about it as size, but another great fit for cloud are companies that have distributed operations. So, if you don't have everyone in one office, but yet they still need to access the same system, being able to centralize that in the cloud across a variety of locations, so like in the case of RingCentral, it's making sure that you don't have to have those major investments in a phone room in every single location and those different types of things. And again, just allowing you to have one centralized platform is a great big value add of the cloud. So keep those things in mind as well as you're considering what types of solutions work best for you, is also kind of the way employees work and need to interact and how they're located. And finally, last question before we wrap up here today. How do you keep a handle on employees' expenses as more and more are starting to use their personal devices for work? I really think, Steve, that this is something that a lot of businesses are looking at, especially when it comes to like cell phones and such. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not really an area I have a lot of familiarity with from how companies view that. Many organizations now are offering that as part of their employment package, especially with when you take a look at service providers and the plans that they have. Either it's bundling of minutes, for the company, so it's just one large bucket that gets dispersed across all employees. I worked for an organization. We had X thousands of minutes per month, and we all kind of dipped into it. A lot of companies just pay for a worker's cell phone bill outright just because of what we highlighted earlier. 56% from an information technology standpoint, people are working outside of the office on some level. So it tends to be somewhat of a perk that a lot of companies are offering. And again, it goes back to that Gartner survey we highlighted earlier as well, that employees consider that when they're making a decision on who they want to work for as well. So obviously, a lot of companies still have employees, pay for their own bill and just expense those individual minutes. But I think the trend is, employees, are more reluctant to carry multiple devices today. I think one of the key trends we're seeing, and this has happened within Cisco as an example. It used to be, the company would pay for both the, like a company like Cisco, your cell phone, the hardware itself, and the service. But as you've seen this shift towards smartphones, and specifically iPhones and Android devices, and there's a shift within service providers going forward not to subsidize the hardware as they used to. Phones are more expensive today. I think an iPhone's actual cost is probably $600, $700. And so even with the subsidy, you're probably paying $300. So like here with Cisco, we have to pay for our own physical devices. They don't pay for the cost of the phone. But if you are a mobile worker within Cisco, if your job function is related to being mobile, they do cover, the mobile bill. So I think as you see this shift, service providers reducing subsidizations, devices that consumers are selecting have a lot more of a personal element as well. People want to carry one phone for both personal and business. It probably just makes sense, going forward, that a lot of companies to attract and retain those employees to probably cover, some of that monthly expense.
Terrific. Thanks, Steve. That was a great answer. And, just to kind of add to that from the RingCentral point of view, since this is right up our alley, in terms of mobility, certain cloud-based systems will have apps that you can use. RingCentral obviously does, that will allow you to actually make VoIP calls through your cell phones as well. So that's another way to kind of manage those costs, because now it's not that they're using up all of their minutes. There's other ways to do that. So those are just, that's just a quick example of another way that you can kind of manage those costs by giving them alternatives to only using their planned minutes. So with that, I know we still have some more questions here in the QI. Sorry, Steve,
That's
go
a
ahead.
good point. But I just wanted to add one last thing. Another aspect to this, and what a lot of companies are starting to do, because employees are more mobile. In fact, I think there's just a statistic that like 60% of phone minutes, even inside of an office, are usually within like 20 feet of a desk phone. I mean, people are still using mobile phones in the office. So a lot of companies are starting to do away with the IP phone in some respects, right? You know, they're issuing the mobile phones with these apps, as Nova described, so you can use it in the office or outside, wherever you may be. So that's another aspect to consider as well if you're really looking at keeping down costs.
Terrific. Yeah. So again, you know, just the bottom line, it's you guys, there's a lot of options out there. I definitely encourage everyone to consider, you know, kind of your situation, where you're at against these 3 pillars, and, you know, look for ways where you can optimize in these 3 different areas to really, again, ensure that you set yourself up for long-term business success. I want to thank Steve for his time today and sharing the Cisco story with us. I really do appreciate that, and I do appreciate everyone attending today's event. Like I said, if we didn't get to your questions, we will follow up afterwards. I hope you found this session insightful, and I hope to see you on future webinars. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.